Well, welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. It's Jim, Josh. Jake is a new father, so he's got the night off. When you have a 7-day-old baby at home, there are other parts of life that take priority. So Josh and I tonight are going to kind of go through my Huddle Report first round mock and talk about what like the way I saw round one going, and then Josh will be probably entering the same contest. So my beans will be spilled before he makes his entry, but I don't think that that's really that big of a deal. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So Jake, what do you think the probability is that Cam Ward goes number one?
At this point, almost 100%. The only feasible thing I could ever see them do is go with the edge rusher and Abdul Carter, but I think it's been well known throughout his pro day, the whole pre-draft process, that the Titans have indeed done their work on the quarterback class, and in my opinion, it's Cam Ward and everybody else in a tier way below. So if they're going to go after their guy who really does have Pro Bowl potential and a guy that could really take the Titans to the playoffs in the right scenario, I really like the mental makeup of this guy. I don't think it's any other pick. And I think the draft really starts at 2 with the Browns.
Okay, and then I was reading tea leaves, and I decided that Travis Hunter was going second to the Browns. What do you think?
I think that's where they're going to go at the end of the day. I know for the past 2 months or so, there's been a lot of which quarterback are they going to take? Is Cam Ward going to fall to them at number 2? Are they going to pick Shedeur at number 2? I think it's been well known at this point that they're going to go with the best available player on the board. To me, that's Abdul Carter, but it's pick and choose. It's 1A, 1B. Travis Hunter definitely fits them better, in my opinion, just because of the versatility he brings and overall superstar playmaking, his ball skills, his instincts. It'll be an instinct change in that offense right away and a true number one guy you can go to. Kind of like what Amari Cooper was for that team, but I think Travis Hunter steps in and might just be a little bit better than what Amari Cooper was as the number one right away in that offense.
Yeah, and I was going very similar thought process to you there. Between, the Browns have a need at wide receiver, and the Browns also have a need at corner.
Mm-hmm.
So depending upon how you would use Hunter and the fact that you have Myles Garrett suggests now you can never have too many edge rushers, but at the same time, the Browns have Myles Garrett. So if Abdul Carter was a different position, like meaning, let's say the other highest graded player was an interior defensive lineman or just insert like offensive tackle or something like that, I could have seen the Browns going a different direction than Hunter. But the fact that Abdul Carter plays a similar role to Myles Garrett, to me, made that Hunter. And then again, I'm reading tea leaves, and I think Abdul Carter is going to the Giants. So what do you think?
I think it's really smart for the Giants, especially with the hints they've been giving us this free agency, signing Jameis Winston as the backup and then Russell Wilson getting the 1-year deal. So they don't have to force a quarterback in the number 3 spot. That's what everybody was scared for all along, especially if the Browns decided to go with Abdul Carter. Then they have a decision between Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. Everybody knows Travis Hunter should have been the right pick, but that would force the quarterback a little bit more. And I don't think Shedeur needs to be forced at number 3, in my opinion. Abdul Carter fits right in with that defense and really is the identity that Brian Daboll is trying to look for on that defense. And it also allows for Kayvon Thibodeau to be expendable. And it gives a lot of options for that team, especially if Travis Hunter isn't there. And don't be surprised if Abdul Carter is the best edge player right away on that Giants team. And that's saying a lot with Brian Burns being there, even though he had a little bit of a down year. Abdul Carter is just that good of an edge prospect, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then I went with Will Campbell to the Patriots. There were 3 players I considered for the Patriots. It was M'Bow, Campbell, or Gentry. And I don't know that you could, in good faith, if you're the Patriots, take Gentry at 4 with your offensive line the way that it is.
That's what's so tricky about this pick. I completely understand the Will Campbell pick. If Rabel and Eli Wolf really do see that vision for Campbell being the long-term left tackle and he passes through the Rabel exam, then I'm more than fine with the pick. I have my personal opinions on Will Campbell. I'm personally lower on him, have a second-round grade in this class, but I'm not of the mass majority with that. The mass majority thinks he's a top 10 pick. Get him in the right situation. Hence the Patriots, he could turn into a starter plus Pro Bowl starter left tackle. But if it was me, I would take Amar Membu if they was to go to the offensive line route. But it's really hard for me to look at Ashton. I know he's a running back, but it's really hard to look at a guy of that caliber sitting in your lap. Running back is a need for them as well. And just passing on him. It's going to be really hard, but if you're going to do it, I would go Amar Membu instead of somebody that has a little bit more variance in where their career could go in Will Campbell. But mass media has been projecting Will Campbell the number 4 this whole time, and I won't be surprised if it happens on draft day.
Yeah, so and I think so the goal of the Huddle Report contest is to be predictive.
Yeah.
I think if I'm listening to the different people with where their boards are, more people have Membu and Simmons up higher,
Yep.
right? Like, I've listened to you. I see Bill Sparks, right? And again, I'm just trying to read tea leaves, and that's why I put Will Campbell there. So if all 4 of those picks are correct, I'm starting with 12 points. You get 2 points if you match the player to the team, and you get an additional point if you match where they are in the draft order.
And I think if you look at where the odds are right now, I think all of these guys are favored to be picked where they're slotted at right now. And like I said, again, I could have my own opinion on Will Campbell all I want. If he fits what Mike Rabel wants in that offense and he sees a role for him right away and for the future, it's not going to matter at the end of the day. It's going to be a good pick if it all works out. It's just the if with Will Campbell. I don't think a lot of people are talking about the if with that. But if we're predicting it based on what's going to happen in the draft, he's the most likely pick in that scenario.
Yeah, so I went with Ashton Jeanty to the Jaguars, and I had 2 or 3 reasons for that. As I'm listening to everybody's player grades, I'm like, okay, Jeanty is likely graded at his position higher than anybody else under him. You're also a new GM in Jacksonville, and you don't want to pass up the Pro Bowl player or the All-Pro player, right? Whereas, like, I think Mason Graham has a safe floor. I don't necessarily know that that's an All-Pro floor, right? So that was why I went with Jeanty to Jacksonville. But what do you think of that, Josh?
Jeanty theoretically is the best player available on the board, and he's going to be for the rest of this entire draft if he somehow falls to, like, let's just say the Bears at 10, for example. He's going to be the best player on the board for each team in front of the Bears. The only reason I give a little pushback on the Jaguars is because of their new general manager, James Gladstone, and his background. Took Kyron Williams in the 5th round with the Rams with their staff. They like to go after guys in day 3 that they know they can develop and get production right away. Not saying that Ashton Jeanty wouldn't fit that offense to a T. He'd be a Pro Bowler right away. There is no question about that. I just see all the holes on that defense, especially that cornerback position, how lackluster this cornerback group is once you get out of rounds 2, rounds 3. I think this is a prime trade back scenario for the Jaguars. Now, we're not predicting this. We're going off of what would be the most predictable top 32 in this contest that we're doing. I think Jeanty, Mason Graham, or Will Johnson would be in that conversation for me. Will Johnson's been getting pushed down a lot just because of the injury concern, not testing all the way. It's a little cold feet on him. He wasn't the most consistent this year in coverage. But if they're trying to get the best need for that team, which is cornerback in my opinion, Will Johnson would be the pick for me, but I know it's a reach for a lot of people. I don't feel the need to force Jeanty to the Jaguars like I would a little bit more with Jeanty to the Patriots, but that's just me.
Yeah, and if you notice, like, from my standpoint, like Jeanty, Johnson, and Graham were the next 3 off the board. The issue is really the order that they go off.
Yeah.
Right? So I did Will Johnson to the Raiders. So my choices there, Mason Graham, Will Johnson, Shedeur Sanders. and then maybe Membu, but not really. Like just from like if you're a GM, and I was kind of putting a GM hat on, I said, who are the blue chip players, and you want to make sure if you're picking in the top 10 that you are getting something that would be considered blue chip.
Mm-hmm.
And that was why I went with Will Johnson there over Shedeur. That was a, like I said, would the Raiders take Shedeur? And I'm like, if I'm the Raiders, I just wait next year for a QB.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be the theme when you go throughout this entire first round. Now, somebody's going to take a flyer on Shedeur. Somebody's going to take a flyer on Dart. We know that at least in the first or early second round. Somebody's going to take a flyer on Milroe. Somebody's going to take a flyer on Slow. But if you look at the quarterbacks this year compared to next year's class, you'll understand why these guys are falling. You don't want to force a quarterback in this spot, why I like you picked Will Johnson right there. I would lean a little bit more towards Amar Membu. I just think he's more of a sure thing at that tackle position. You can get somebody that you don't have to worry about Damar Glaze being your starting right tackle. Had a decent rookie season, but Amar Membu would be a better starting right tackle right away. You can also move Membu inside the guard if you decide to do that. And Mason Graham would be the only other player I would consider here, but that's getting basically Christian Wilkins body type on the other side of that defensive tackle line. So I don't think the fit would be best there. Again, Will Johnson got pushed down a lot of people's boards because of all the pre-draft stuff and him being injured. It doesn't matter. His tape coming into the 2024 season was one of the best out of all the prospects in this draft. I don't think he should get too much cold feet if he starts to fall in the draft. I would love the fit for him at the Raiders with the 6th pick in the draft.
So I almost went bold and predicted a trade. So I actually think pick 7 is Shedeur Sanders. But I didn't submit the trade to the contest.
Mm-hmm.
So the instructions that I was given, like if I predict the trade right, I would get 3 points because I would get Shedeur Sanders at 7 plus him going to the Saints. So I think if Shedeur Sanders gets to 7, he's the pick, but I don't think the Jets are the team picking it. So I went with, okay, who would the Jets take? The Jets, in my opinion, would take Mason Graham because the Jets could trade down 2 spots, still get Mason Graham. I don't think the Panthers are taking Mason Graham.
Mm-mm.
Right. Just I believe the Panthers have a decent amount of money invested at defensive tackle that they're going a different direction. So I actually think the Jets would be making the Mason Graham pick at 9. The Saints are making the Shedeur Sanders pick at 7, but I chose to not enter that into the contest.
And I love the idea of Mason Graham being next to Quinnen Williams, in my opinion. Hey, hold on. There he is. How you doing, Mr. Bill?
Great. Figured I'd come join you guys on a Monday night while I'm on the road for draft week this week. So
perfect time in the middle of all.
Yeah. So this is everybody's chance to ridicule my 1-round mock. So.
Let's do it.
So right now we're sitting at the Jets with the 7th pick. Jim, in his head, he didn't submit it, but he has the Saints trading up to the 7th pick, taking Shedeur, and then the Jets going back to 9, taking Mason Graham. But he didn't submit the trade. It sticks right now. Mason Graham at 7, Shedeur at 9. But we're talking about Mason Graham at 7 here. With all the players on the board, I personally like it. I would still lean on Amar Membu. I think he should have been off the board just a little bit earlier, but pairing Mason Graham up next to Quinnen Williams would be an ideal fit for him, in my opinion, not trying to force him to a situation like the Raiders at 6 next to Christian Wilkins, for example.
Right. And you're spot on with that. I will tell you, I'll throw out a couple of names that have been getting some buzz here at the kickoff of draft week. Number 1 is Armand Membu that you already talked about. Putting right tackle, you then have Fashanu and Membu as your tackle duo for Justin Fields or whoever your quarterback's going to be. The other 2 to be on the lookout for, Tyler Warren. Obviously, Justin Fields, you need a security blanket for him over the middle of the field. But the third one that's been getting a lot of buzz here recently is Jahdae Barron. And I think him paired next to Sauce Gardner, I think would be just a deadly, deadly duo of cornerbacks in New York.
And don't be surprised when Jahdae Barron goes really high in this draft. His tape backs it up, his versatility, and with the loss of DJ Reed going to the Lions in the offseason, he does fit that similar body type, can play on the cornerback out boundary if need be, but just gives you so much versatility. I do think Jahdae Barron does go in the top 12 of this draft, just purely off what he can do on the football field.
I have him going top 13, so I was
Right
off my pick.
Yeah.
So Jalen Walker to the Panthers. How do we feel about that one?
I feel like that's been a plug and play for the past 2 or 3 months, whether you like or dislike Jalen Walker. If you're talking about guys that fit Dan Morgan's type of player mold, Jalen Walker is the definition of that. You can question his ability to play true inside linebacker if he's going to be a full-time edge rusher because of his size and his being able to play the edge on run contains, but his versatility, kind of learning under Shaq Thompson for 1 year and really taking that step to being a real true inside linebacker, in my opinion, would do wonders for that Panthers defense and would really accelerate them to where they're trying to get to, because they need to make improvements, even though they had a really good back half of this year.
Yeah, no, Josh hit the nail on the head. This is probably about as chalk as you're going to find after the top 3 picks in Jalen Walker. There's a lot of love not only for Jalen Walker in Carolina, but Jalen Walker in the top 10. One of the things that isn't talked about was one of the highest character kids in this class, and the things he can bring to an organization. I would not be shocked if he goes higher, but I think right now 8 is his absolute floor. I think Dan Morgan, being a linebacker, is going to know the importance of having a linebacker in that top 10 of this class.
So I think the Saints get Shedeur. And as I look at this, one of the reasons that I kept the Saints at 9, I can see the Saints trading up with either the Jets or the Raiders to go get him.
Yeah.
And I don't think it changes the Raiders or the Jets picks that I have. Right. So even if the Raiders traded down to 9, that would still be Will Johnson. Even if the Jets traded down to 9, it would still be Mason Graham.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's really like the order that Johnson, Graham, Walker, Sanders go off the board there next was, I guess that's just where my head was as I was filling this out. I think the most notable thing as I was going through this is I said Tyler Warren isn't going top 10. And okay, so first of all, I have a running back going top 10, and I just want everybody to know that pains me for Genty to go at 5. You don't see me mock running backs in the top 10 very often. I think tight ends have such a huge curve coming into the league that what we saw Brock Bowers do, even if you think Tyler Warren is that same player, predicting that to me just seems like the value of picking a tight end high to me just doesn't feel like it's there. That's why I have Warren falling all the way to 14. Now, I could see that if Warren gets to where the Bears are, the Colts might trade up to go get him. Mm-hmm. I could see there being a move because okay, Membu might go to the 49ers. If they had to choose between Membu and Stewart, I guess I could sell it either way. Yeah. But I think the 49ers need a left tackle, and Membu is a right tackle, correct?
Yes, but you could theoretically transition him to the left side. Even though he projects best as a guard, he would be able to play left tackle at an adequate level at the NFL level.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll throw this out there too, and it's kind of spicy, but I'm here for hot takes. Are we absolutely positive that Ben Johnson, who ran 12 personnel at a 35% clip last year, doesn't take Tyler Warren to pair him with Cole Kmet?
I mean, if you're talking about Tyler Warren versus Marion Hampton, not saying Genty's there at 10. If Genty's there at 10, it's a different conversation just because of his track record with drafting Jahmyr Gibbs and how dynamic Genty would be in that offense. It'd be the best fit for him day one. But if you're going Marion Hampton versus Tyler Warren and you're using 12 personnel at a 35% clip and you're not tied to Cole Kmet like that, even though he's been a solid starter at the NFL level, I think Tyler Warren's tight end 1 right away. And Cole Kmet could be expendable at that point. And if not, you got a really awesome tight end duo.
See, we got a draft professor party here. So, Chris, welcome to the party.
Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate being on the show.
Yeah. So we are going through my huddle report first round mock. So I had Membu going to the Bears, and then Shamar Stewart. Like, I wanted to take Shamar Stewart higher, and this is as high as I could take him.
Now, let me throw this
it.
at you. I know it's been the trendy thing to mock Shedeur at 9 to the Saints. I think it's been more of a forced thing because people in the media don't want to imagine a world where Shedeur falls out of the top 10. And if I'm the Saints, in my opinion, are you really going to draft Shedeur Sanders and then kind of live in this state of mediocrity for at least 1 or 2 more years until you get enough supporting cast around Shedeur Sanders to finally realize what this is going to get? I'm afraid the Saints are just going to go in the same mediocre cycle that they're going to go over and over again if they force that Shedeur Sanders pick, in my opinion. That's where I think Shamar Stewart would be really fun to slide in at number 9. Shamar or Jahdae Barron. I'm not the biggest Shamar Stewart guy in the world, but if you get him learning under a guy like Cam Jordan to eventually replace him and learn the techniques that he needs to learn at the NFL level, that'd be the place where Shamar Stewart's potential could get maximized quickly and the most efficiently. I would lean Shamar Stewart or Jahdae Barron to the Saints at 9. But for the 49ers, if you're looking at Josh Simmons on the board and you have an obvious need at that left tackle spot after Trent Williams eventually retires, I think it'd be too hard to pass up on that unless you go down the Walter Nolan path. Walter Nolan, I could understand more, but that's where I would lean more with the 49ers.
And one of the things that I was trying to toy with towards the end of this, we haven't gotten down to the playoff teams yet, but to me, the 49ers are actually a team that has the ammo to trade back up, right? Because I think they have a couple of third-round picks.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, where Baltimore, Buffalo, et cetera, pick right there at the last 5 or 6 spots, I was like, the 49ers, if they grab, let's say, Stewart here, they can still trade back up for an offensive tackle because I don't believe I have Ursary in round 1.
And if not Ursary, Connerly, or one of those guys that could be there in the later part of the first round. If they go that route and decide to get Shamar Stewart, the high flyer potential, if they trade back up in the first round, it would make way more sense in my mind.
I just want to throw something out to Bill, Jim, and also you, Josh. And I get what you're saying, the argument with Shedeur versus Saints, and we're all coming from it at an analytical level. Like, okay, yeah, this doesn't match up with this doesn't do that. I get it. There's a business side to all this, though. I mean, you're the Saints. Do you really want to go into the season with Ben DiNucci, Jake Haener, and Spencer Rattler at quarterback? I mean, you're trying to sell tickets. You're trying to give hope to the fans. You're trying to show Kellen Moore, yep, we are serious. We don't want you to just lose for a draft pick. So to me, Shedeur fits everything. He's not the flashy quarterback. But you know what? He's Dak Prescott / Jared Goff / Tua Tagovailoa. You don't know what's coming out next year. I mean, for all we know, it could be a worse quarterback draft next year if Arch Manning decides, yeah, you know what? I want to play 2 more seasons of college football. So you need a quarterback. I mean, and you had to have hope, and if you're an owner, you have to sell tickets. Shedeur just makes too much sense from every level. More than micro.
And Chris, I kind of agree with you. Is that's the pick that you have to make if you're the Saints, because you don't want to go in with Spencer Rattler as QB1. Right, because I don't think Haener had the chance to beat him out last year, right? Like, Bill, do you see anything out of Jake Haener?
So, I don't. Here's where I'll push back a little bit on the Shedeur at 9 to Saints conversation. I'm not disagreeing with Chris that the Saints need to look at a quarterback. But if I'm looking at quarterbacks that Kellen Moore has worked with in the past, it's Dak Prescott, it's Justin Herbert, guys that are athletic, can move outside the pocket, and have decent to adequate NFL arm strength, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I look at Shedeur, I don't see that. Shedeur, I see a guy who throws with timing and anticipation and who dices from the pocket. If the Saints are going to take a quarterback in this year's class, Jackson Dart would be a significantly better fit for them than Shadur Sanders would be. But I am not under any circumstances advocating for Jackson Dart at pick 9 in the first round or the second round or even the third round. There's no secret that I don't like Jackson Dart, and I'll scream that into the void until draft day.
Yeah, and here is a hot take. So, Bill, you got to tell me how hot this one is. The Saints will be picking in the top 10 for the next 3 drafts.
That's like as hot as an ice cube, Jim. I think I'd be shocked if they didn't.
And that's
right. Like
that's my concern was the whole time. Like ever since Drew Brees retired, I know that's what 2020, 2021 season.
Yeah.
The Saints have just been fighting with the cap. They've been trying to put out a competent veteran roster to sneak in that weak NFC South. And up to this point, it has been proven that it hasn't worked. And every team in that division just keeps getting better and better. I completely understand the side of you needing to sell tickets, but I'd rather you fucking trash for the Saints position, even though you don't typically do this in the NFL. Trash a damn season instead of trying to go in the same cycle you've been going on, even if it's Jackson Dart instead of Shadur Sanders. Hit the full.
This is not a what I would do mock.
Yeah,
no, that's not. This isn't what I would do. This is what I think happens. Like I'm trying to get points, right?
Yeah,
right. And the other thing that I'll do, and I'll play devil's advocate because I've already started grinding 2026 tape at this point. If I'm going to sell tickets in New Orleans, being able to say I'm going to keep a kid in town whose father is the offensive coordinator.
Yes.
I'm going to take Garrett Nussmeier in the top 10 of next year's draft. That's going to sell some tickets.
Yep.
True. You're asking fans to come this year. Go, yep, we're throwing the season. Now, don't worry about fans. Wait till next year. I mean, it's tough when you're saying this season's going to be lost. It's a tankathon.
It is very tough. It's just they've just put themselves in that situation, not just with the talent they acquired, but with the cap hell they put themselves. So they are climbing themselves out, restructuring contracts year after year after year just to get themselves under the limit. Now this year, this is the first year they're finally under the limit. They got a little bit of wiggle room, but they're still in the same predicament as they were. I rather just.
And then they signed Chase Young to a 3-year, $50 million deal. So
Yeah.
I don't think they've learned from being. The Saints can't be allowed to have cap space. I think the NFL needs to put that into some regulation. The Saints cannot have any cap space ever.
Well, and you wonder what that, let's say, coaching interview with Kellen Moore was like, because like if I'm a coach and I'm coming into that, and when Sean McDermott got hired into Buffalo, he was walking into a situation where Buffalo did not have a lot of cap room, right? We had money tied up into Mario Williams, Marcel Darius. Those are the two. Jerry Hughes was on that team, and Sammy Watkins was, and Buffalo just basically punted all those guys away except Jerry Hughes, right? Meaning that you got to get them off the books. You take the cap hit so that year 2. The cap situation looks way better than it did when you entered year 1. And my opinion is for the Saints, they're better off to, like, I realize they can't really cut a lot of people because they need them on the roster and it's more expensive to cut them than it is to keep them.
Yep.
But they just have to let the contracts expire and replace them with rookies. And they need to do that for like 3 straight years. So what do you think, like Membu or Stewart? How high do you have Stewart, Bill? I know that you have Scourton higher, but
Scourton is higher. I can tell you in my mock exercise, I have Stewart coming off of the board with the final pick at pick 32 because it just screams Philadelphia to take a guy who is falling with a 10 RAS score that everyone's overthinking. It just screams Howie Roseman. It just screams it.
Yes,
he's an SEC player, so you have that going for it too.
And everybody in the league would just immediately just think Howie Roseman is some sort of wizard. I'm a little lower on Shamar Stewart than some folks are. He's currently rated as my 33rd overall prospect because you can't talk Shamar Stewart and not talk about the lack of sack production. Is it his end-all be-all? No. He is a good run defender. But if I've got a guy who has these athletic gifts, but he's only had, a limited number of sacks over his career, I question, do you know what you're doing? And if you don't, that's fine. I can teach that. If defensive line coaches teach it all the time. I'm not going to teach that to a ninth, 10th, 11th overall pick in the NFL draft. You've got to have something to give me. That's why I think he's going to slide, because teams are going to say, look, he's a great run defender. He'll be an NFL level run defender at his bare minimum. But in this class, I'm looking for a guy I can plug and play, especially at the top. When you talk about the Saints, when you talk about the Jets, when you talk about the Raiders, they need talent. They're picking in the top 10 of the draft because there's a dearth of talent there. That's why I think he's going to slide. Could he go higher than 32? He absolutely could. But as we all know, Howie Roseman is going to find some form of way to get up into the 20s and take Shamar Stewart.
So I'm really curious, because the Huddle Report will have live scoring. I'm really curious to see how many people get wherever Shamar Stewart lands. I'm curious to see how many people get that right.
Now, in my opinion, Shamar Stewart's got to land in a very scheme-specific scenario. He needs to land in a 3-4 defense where he can line up mostly as a 5-tech and sometimes line up as a straight edge rusher. I don't like him as a true traditional defensive end, just because unless you got him going straight like a bull on a run play or a pass play, he gets lost in the run. He doesn't have the mental processing quite yet to read and diagnose block shed as well as he should for somebody with his stature. But like I said with the Saints, if you get him under a guy like Cam Jordan or a true veteran that could teach him the techniques of disengaging, actually getting involved with the play as much as he needs to be at his stature, that would be ideal for him. But if you're forcing him to a situation like the 49ers trying to have him as a true edge rusher right next to Nick Bosa, I don't think that would be the best fit for him.
I'm going to go out on a limb. I don't think he'll fall farther than 18 because – and I chalked this up to Albert Breer and Greg Bedard, and they pointed out he plays disciplined football. And I know we love sacks, we all love the numbers with the pass rushes, but and Bill, I know you do scouting, so you could probably back this up here. Coaches want to know: can you play, your zones? Can you play containment? I don't want you just going in for a sack, and next thing you know, quarterback's running around and it's a bootleg, and all of a sudden you've given up 10, 15 yards like Mahomes did against the Texans. Can you contain the pocket, collapse the pocket? And it seems that's what the word out of Texas A&M was. They had him do a lot of that. Do not try to flush the quarterback out. Keep him in there. Don't let quarterbacks just run all over you. I can see the Seahawks, if he gets to Mike McDonald will jump on that and go, you know what? He can play defense like I want to. I don't care about the sacks. I just don't want quarterbacks to just run around. Next thing you know, it's, 7 rushes for 80 yards, and I'm going, what the hell just happened?
That would be an ideal scheme fit as well in that Mike McDonald defense. He would fit like a glove.
So, Bill, how would you comp Shamar Stewart's run defense to Gregory Rousseau? Are they to me feel like the same player, with Stewart having better athletic explosiveness?
That's about a fair assessment. He's a more athletic Gregory Rousseau. My comp for him, for Shamar Stewart, was Rashawn Gary when he landed in Green Bay. Gary had the same questions. Very athletic, big body guy. Do you play him at defensive end? Do you play him at tackle? Do you play him at 5-tech? Where do you play the kid? And eventually Green Bay figured it out. Yeah. But that's kind of what you're getting. You're getting a less productive Rashawn Gary, which, it ultimately worked out for Green Bay, but not all organizations are Green Bay.
Yeah. So, because if in your mock he fell to 32, I don't see Brandon Beane passing on Stewart.
Not unless Kevin Grant or Derek Harmon staring at him in the face.
No, but I think Shamar Stewart is the exception to the defensive tackle and corner. It's if Shamar Stewart or Michael Williams are there for Buffalo, those are the types of players that Buffalo likes. And one of the things that I don't see the conversation with in Bills Mafia is floor versus ceiling. It seems like everybody in Bills Mafia land wants Trey Amos, but Brandon Beane doesn't draft for the floor. He's going to like Ravel or Hairston because the ceiling is higher. And it's the same thing with Stewart. He's going to draft for the ceiling, the same way when he drafted Rousseau. That was a stealing pick. The player was young. There was something that was untapped, and you're trying to tap into it. That's how he's going to draft in round 1 if he makes a pick. So Tet McMillan at 12 to Dallas. So Chris, how high do you have McMillan on your board?
Yeah, the highest I have him is probably about that. I mean, it's the Drake London effect. You know, in today's wide receivers, everybody wants speed, everybody wants quickness, and he's more, from what I've read and seen. He's a big wide receiver, but he's not really fast. Is he explosive? We're not sure. He's solid, but it's almost like if you're drafting him, are you getting a true number 1, or are you just getting a guy that you think you can plug and play, and he's probably a 2 or a 3? So,
well,
I can see him falling all the way down to probably the Chiefs at 31 because it's just like, all right, well, is he that great, or is he just a good, solid? It's like a sandwich. I have a good peanut butter and jelly sandwich. That's it. It's nothing great, nothing fancy. It's just a solid peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
And I think that's a really good point that we should make about a significant number of players in this draft class. You're not drafting all pros. You're getting starters, right? Tet McMillan is likely a starting wide receiver for 16 NFL teams as a wide receiver too, right? He wouldn't start for Cincinnati, and maybe we could find 2 or 3 other wide receiver rooms where he wouldn't be one of the 2 best receivers on the roster. But generally speaking, if Tet McMillan comes in to the league, he's one of the 48 best wide receivers in the league, right? And we could say that probably about Burden, right? He's coming in. He's going to be, and not Bill, I know that you're higher on Burden, right? But what you're getting with this class, you're not getting an all-pro wide receiver. You're getting a starting wide receiver. And maybe a starting wide receiver that's a plus matchup in certain situations.
Now, in my opinion, Tet is not my wide receiver too, but theoretically, if they were in the correct offense, Tet McMillan would be the best fit alongside CeeDee Lamb. But I am very concerned that the Cowboys will misuse him if he gets drafted there. Where I'm thinking if they decide to go at the wide receiver position is getting that Z type or somebody that can interchange the slot in the Z. That would be Matt Golden and Luther Burden. I am in the Mekabuka guy. He is my wide receiver too. I don't think he would fit that offense the best just because CeeDee primarily runs everything out of the slot. You want CeeDee moving behind the line of scrimmage pre-snap. You want him to be comfortable where he is. If they were to go the defensive route, I think Walter Nolan would be an awesome pick for the Cowboys. I don't think they have the balls to do it. But if they're going for that wide receiver, I want them to get the best fit for that offense in a class where you can really interchange wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. That would be Matt Golden or Luther Burden for me.
Yep, and I'll throw this out there too, just to connect some more dots. I think Matthew Golden's going to end up being the pick for Dallas, and the reason I say that, Jerry Jones down there in Dallas, what does he love? He looks over at his boys over in Austin and the Burnt Orange and says, "Man, they've got this really fast wide receiver that would look great next to CeeDee Lamb." And take Matthew Golden. It just feels like a Jerry pick. We talked about Shamar and a Howie Roseman. Matt Golden feels like a Jerry pick.
Yes.
Okay. And then I have Jahdae Barron going off the board to Miami. So, when I was plotting the mock, I had Barron at 13 to Miami before I did the first 12 picks, at least with some of them, right? So this is me reading again, Jalen Ramsey on his way out. And if you can replace Jalen Ramsey with Jahdae Barron, and it's interesting too, right? So with the interactive simulator, there were Dolphins fans that had Barron going to Miami. So he was sitting right at the top of their board in the simulator. So
you'll get no pushback from me from this.
When your CB2 is Storm Duck, you need Jahdae Barron whether you try Jalen Ramsey or not.
Yeah, that was a pretty good smile there, Josh. That was a good take, Bill.
Yeah.
And then Tyler Warren to the Colts. How high do you guys, Bill? How high do you have Warren?
So Warren is one of my top players in this class. Now, in my simulation, in my submission, he falls to 13 to a trading up Denver Broncos, jumping Indianapolis to get him. but Tyler Warren is my 6th overall player in this class with a first round grade.
And Josh, how high do you have Warren?
Warren's right in the middle of the first round for me, just because of some athletic limitations, being an elusive guy. He's not Brock Bowers after the catch. Nobody's Brock Bowers after the catch, but you're getting the best tight end in this class, in my opinion. And it's a decent little gap between him and Colson Loveland. Colson Loveland's still a top 32 player, in my opinion, but in other words, just that much better, in my opinion. This has been a shoe-in mock since September, October, ever since Warren really took that leap this year. Colts have needed a tight end for forever. I know Colts fans will give a little bit of pushback on this because they've seen how their tight end development has been over the past couple years. But Tyler Warren is a different body type at that position. He will bring the physicality at the line of scrimmage, and he'll be able to box out some of those arid Anthony Richardson throws over the middle and really go up and get those contested catches.
Yep. And another thing to add to that, too, two things to add to that. Number one, my comp for Tyler Warren is Jeremy Shockey. If you mean to tell me I can get a player like Jeremy Shockey in the first half of round 1, I'm going to take that and run with it. The other thing Tyler Warren can do is we all have seen Shane Steichen loves quarterback draws, loves quarterback run plays, but Anthony Richardson's had some problems staying healthy. Why don't I just take Tyler Warren, who's a former quarterback himself, and say, here you go, Tyler, you now get those carries.
Yeah. I mean, I love the fit with Tyler Warren for the Colts. And I did actually consider him for the Bears. So I think, Bill, you pointed that out. I did think that, but my opinion is, even with the free agent signings, if you're the Bears, you have to invest some early draft capital in the trenches.
At least, yeah.
I'll throw a wild card out there. How about number 8 to the Panthers? I mean, we keep saying edge, but you know, if you're trying to actually, if you're the Panthers looking, you go, my wide receiver group is lacking. My tight end group is lacking. You know, I want Bryce Young to succeed. We've seen before, if you the best friend for any young quarterback is a tight end who can catch the ball. And you got to figure Dave Canales looking going, I got to get somebody who can actually get a 7-yard route, 8-yard route, just so Bryce isn't getting killed. I could see the Panthers go, you know what? Let's just take a sure thing. The one thing we know is he's going to be able to play. He can catch the ball. He can do all this. We need something, or else this is going to be another, lost season for Bryce Young, and he's going to run around and get killed.
I don't mind that at all. I do think the Panthers like their tight end room a little bit more than we do as a media. They have depth there. They got a bunch of guys that can do different things. I do like what Jatavion Sanders did a little bit this year, but if they did pull the trigger with him at 8, I would have no pushback at all. Your analysis is completely correct on that.
Yeah. No. So then, Chris, I have Mike Green going at 15 to the Falcons. So what do you think of that?
It makes sense. He's been there. They needed it. They needed sacks. They didn't pressure. I mean, unfortunately, last year was a lost year. They made the trade with the Patriots for crap. I'm getting brain. Yeah, they gave a 3rd-round pick for that, and that was a bust. So they need to do something. And I know Green's had off-field issues. I know it's you wonder, okay, is he a product of Marshall, or is he that good of a defensive end? But a lot of these scouts and GMs, they look at the tapes and they look at, all of a sudden the speed, the size, and they go, we can fix it. Bill knows exactly. Jim, we can fix it.
Yeah.
So, Bill, did you have an edge rusher going to Atlanta?
Yep. So it came down to 2 edge rushers. It came down to Mike Green and Mykel Williams. In my mock, I had them taking Mykel Williams just because he's a bit of a cleaner prospect from an edge standpoint. He's also younger. Mykel Williams is one of the youngest edges in this class. But if Atlanta takes Mike Green, I think it's a great fit. By all accounts and who I've talked to, they are not concerned in any way, shape, or form about his checkered past. And one of the big things that he did for himself when he was on the podium at the Combine, he told teams, hey, here's what happened. I have these charges. I'll answer any questions. And by all accounts from who I've talked to and just folks around the league, that spoke volumes for him. Mm-hmm. And that's why I don't think we hear as much about the situation anymore, because he owned up to it.
Yeah.
So, Josh, what edges do you have in that 15-16 range for Atlanta and Arizona?
So the best edge, in my opinion, on the board would be Michael Williams. I would have no problem if they picked him there, but I question the fit with them being a 3-4 defense, having those wide 9 edge rushers. I think they're looking for more of that body type. Mike Green would fit that better, in my opinion. Absolutely. Those are 2 top 4 edges, in my opinion. You couldn't go wrong with either. 2 names I'll throw out, though, to be very intriguing if they decide to pull the trigger. I know there's been a lot of pushback on James Pierce. It's going to be really hard for me to look at James Pierce or a guy like Donovan Ezeraku in that position. Donovan Ezeraku would be a little bit of a reach, in my opinion, but looking at James Pierce and Mike Green, that would be a really hard decision for me if I was the Falcons at 15. And if they want to say, screw it, we're going to go with an edge rusher later because there is a lot of depth in this class and get the best inside linebacker still on the board, Jahad Campbell would be a really, really, really fun pick for Atlanta, give them a lot of versatility and be an instant starter at that inside linebacker position. But I would, Jahad Campbell and James Pierce would be 2 names I would keep an eye out on if they decide to go that direction.
Okay, and then so when I was done with the board after pick 16, I said, okay, there's not a lot left, right? Going back to like what the limited number of first round grades was. So that is why Malachi Starks was going to Cincinnati. Like out of the players that are left, it would either be Starks or Campbell with the first round grades or Loveland. So to me, that's how Starks like aligns to Cincinnati. They need a safety. They need a safety like it's going out of style. Right. And it's one of the last blue chip grades on the board. Now, like Bill, I know that you would have Xavier Watts high enough to go there. So Bill, did you have Xavier Watts in your first round?
So he did not make it into my first round in this scenario. I think I'm higher on him than the league is. But one thing that you did do on yours that I would flip would be I would put Ben Morrison at 17 to the Bengals because just as they need a safety, they also need corner help. And Al Golden, the former defensive coordinator in Notre Dame, is now in Cincinnati. So you have a guy who knows how to use Ben Morrison to his fullest effect. So that's where I would go. But you're right. The Bengals just need all sorts of defensive help. It's at this point, it's can you stop a runner or a pass catcher? Great. Put on some stripes. We'll see you on Sunday if I'm the Bengals at this point.
So Dale and Ryan and Parker have convinced me that the Bengals have invested enough recent draft picks in the defensive backfield that it wouldn't be a corner. That's what they convinced me. That doesn't mean that they're right. It's, if I'm listening to, 3 Bengals people that come on this channel often, that's what I hear. So that was why I went edge. I think the only other player I would have considered there for Cincinnati was actually Walter Nolan.
And that's where I was going to pivot to. I do not have a problem with the Malachi Starks pick at all. I understand why you did it. He is a top 32 player for me, and he's going to fall way later in this draft than he's supposed to, and some team's going to pick him up and have an absolute field day when they draft him. I just think that defensive line and that offensive line are way too much of a need for them to pass up, even if they decide to reach on an interior offensive lineman. You invested all the money in Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, and T. Higgins. You have to protect them. And if you're not, and if you're going to go on the defensive side of the ball, you damn well better get an interior presence, or else you are really in the same situation as you was last year, trying to fight out of 28 points per game given up on a single year. So I would lean Walter Nolan. I would also lean the best offensive lineman on the board. Wherever they like, whoever they like, that would be the direction I would go with the Bengals, just because of how they set up their cap situation.
I half agree. I go with either Josh Simmons to the Bengals or the guy that, everybody's talking about when, it depends what you like. Nick Manowari, because he's not everybody's cup of tea. Some people say, well, he's still raw a bit compared to Malachi Starks. He makes too many mistakes, but he just looks the part. And, you look at more of these safeties who can play linebacker with tight ends, going bananas on teams. You have to look at him and go, oh, my God, he's 6'3", 220 pounds, 4.38, 40-yard dash. I mean, you can hear defensive coordinators going, we can put him somewhere. We don't know where yet, but we unlocked this guy. This is, Ray Palu 2.0, except taller, bigger, and stronger.
Yeah.
Yep. And then, so Josh, like, I love that I can put Jihad Campbell to the Seahawks. So I remember when you did the scouting report on Jihad Campbell, and I believe it was in early November, and you were pounding the table first round grade in November on Campbell. You were the first one I heard saying that, and then everybody else caught up to you. And then I asked, well, pick a defensive coordinator that he should go to. And you said it was either McDonald or and I forgot who the Ravens defensive coordinator was, but you said it had to be somebody in the Mike McDonald tree, the Ravens Seahawks. So it happened.
I think the biggest thing for Jihad Campbell that really took that step for him in the media, getting him true first round mocks all the time, was the consistency he showed this year. As of the beginning of the year, he was more of a projectable guy, such a long arm wingspan, athletic as hell, can range all across the field. You were more projecting him, but you saw the floor this year, and even at his worst games, he would be an adequate starter, in my opinion, at the NFL level. A guy that has a lot of ceiling, but still gives you just enough of a floor where you can take him in the middle to late of the first round and plug and play him as a starter if you need to year one. There's too much to like about Jihad Campbell, in my opinion, fitting in that 3-4 defense, especially if you get him under a Mike McDonald or somebody like that. That would be awesome for his development and be a really good fit for him.
Yeah, and Bill, how high do you have Jihad Campbell?
So Jihad Campbell for me is just outside of my first round grades. I have 19 first round grades. He is number 20. And he is solely that just because of, like Josh said, he's very consistent in the season. He's a little bit lower because I do have some concerns about the labrum issue. It's not major. He's still my linebacker one. And that's with Jalen Walker being a linebacker on my board. So he's right there. It's just you have that concern. You're always going to have that concern when you have a linebacker who has a labrum issue. Is he going to be ready for training camp is my big question. If he is, it's an absolute steal for Seattle here at 18.
And Chris, where do you have Jihad Campbell on your board?
Yeah, I have him as sometimes as high as the Dolphins, and then I don't think he goes past the Chargers because as I said, either as you mentioned before, either the Seahawks or the Chargers. It's McDonald, it's Harbaugh. They both like linebackers who can attack the quarterback, cover the field, mobile. They can do everything, and they want guys who can understand the system. They don't want have to teach stuff. It's like, all right, plug and play. That to me, that's I think the biggest selling point for any of the Alabama guys and the Georgia guys is they understand how to play football. They understand how to diagnose plays. They understand how to take coaching, and I think that's one of those things we don't myself doesn't understand. Like, all right, coaches want guys who. We need to play right away. We can't baby. We can't hold your hand. Going to throw you to the deep end and see if you can swim.
Yep. So then, at one point, I had Maxwell Hairston at 19, and then somebody in the draft professor chat said, "No, Hairston's not the right fit for Tampa Bay." So I moved it, but it seems to be that's all the chatter is that it's Hairston. So Hairston has to be in the mock because he's being invited to the draft.
Yeah.
So he's really high on at least one team's board, right? But I did Benjamin Morrison at 19 to Tampa Bay. So, Josh, if the board fell this way, who is your BPA at 19?
BPA would be, let me look at my board real quick. Amenawari and I think Josh Simmons might have been off the board by now. Those would be my two best players available, but I don't think they're the right fit or the right picks for the Buccaneers. I have no problem with Benjamin Morrison before the season being picked at this spot, and I still love Benjamin Morrison. He is still a top 32 player for me. Seeing him getting mocked in the late second round just because of his injury, I think it's a little egregious in my opinion. I think it's just prospect fatigue more than anything. I also think it's too far out of the possibility where he gets drafted this high because of those same exact reasons. I love Benjamin Morrison's tape in 2023. For a guy that's not an elite speed athlete, he locks down. You could be a man-to-man corner and just leave him on an island. He's shown that against top-tier talent last year. I think if they decide to go in the corner market, it would be a Maxwell Harrison or a Trey Amos. I have Trey Amos significantly higher than Maxwell Harrison. If they decide to go that route, that would be my ideal corner for them. But I understand the Ben Morrison or Maxwell Harrison being in that spot as well, because those are fit for needs for Tampa Bay.
So, Bill, how about you? Where do you have Morrison on your board?
Jim, I am high as a kite on Ben Morrison. He's my cornerback 3, and that's with Travis Hunter being a corner, and I've got him 17th overall on my board. When you watch his tape, this is a guy that excelled in both man and zone coverage. Yes, he has injury concerns, but by all accounts, from what I've heard and folks I've spoken with, the medicals are clear. There are no existing issues. There's no long-term issues or effects. This is a guy that is going to be a corner 1 for a team that drafts him. And Josh is somewhat right that it's probably a little bit high for Ben Morrison based on how he's viewed in the league. I don't think it is based on how I grade him. If you told me today that the Buccaneers were drafting Ben Morrison at 19, I'd say, great, go buy a Tampa Bay Bucks jersey with his name on the back of it.
Okay. And Chris, where do you have Colston Loveland, and do you have him high enough to go at 20 to Denver?
I do. Denver's the one team I can't peg. It's like, all right. It's like, well, 2 weeks ago, we're going to take a defensive tackle. Then last week, I was convinced, we're going to take Amari Hampton. Now I'm like, they'll probably take Colston Loveland. It's weird because everybody's going, with all of these. It's either Colston Loveland. Well, he's, the speed isn't there. We want more speed, or it's just, tight ends. You can get them later on. As I say, it's tough to figure out with him because it's one of those, eye of beholders. Some teams will go, yeah, let's take a tight end in the first round. I could see him actually going, the farthest I see him dropping is the Eagles, just because you hear they're trading their tight end. They want to get younger. And once again, this is one of those, Howie Roseman, he knows everything. He is, he's playing 3D chess and everybody else is playing checkers. I can see him taking Colston Loveland, flipping Schultz for a third-round pick, and then all of a sudden we're going, hey, Howie Roseman just stole the draft. Once again, stole the draft like last year.
Okay. And, Bill, do you have Loveland high enough on your board that you could take him at 20?
Yeah, so Loveland is my tight end 2, and I have him as 28th overall on my board right now. But I think when you look at what Denver's wanting, they're wanting a joker type of player that they can get out in space and make some plays, and whether that's a running back like Amari Hampton or a tight end like Colston Loveland. This is one of those prospect to team pairings that just makes too much sense, which is why it probably doesn't happen on draft night. But we talked about it. You want to give, just like Chris talked about with Tyler Warren and Bryce Young, you want to give Bo Nix a weapon at tight end that he can grow with as a security blanket. And yes, they signed Evan Ingram, but it's a short-term deal. He is not your finish. He is not your final stop at tight end. And even then, if you want to use Evan Ingram and Colston Loveland in 12 personnel sets, by all means, Sean Payton will make that work. So I think it's a great fit here at 20 for Loveland and Denver.
Yeah. The only other player I really considered there was Golden or Egbuka. So, Josh, would you do Omarion Hampton, Colston Loveland, Egbuka, or Golden at 20 if the board fell this way?
Where the players are ranked on my board, the 2 receivers in Omarion Hampton are higher rated than Loveland. I have my little bit of knick-knack concerns with Colston Loveland, but with Bill hit it on the head. When you talk about player and team fits, it is hard to look at Sean Payton not drafting this guy and being the next in line of his great tight ends. And with Evan Ingram being a guy that you could really play as a slot wide receiver, he's just a big body slot wide receiver, in my opinion. He's not really an inline blocking tight end. Colston Loveland's not the most refined blocking tight end in the world either, but he is right away better than Evan Ingram is at the line of scrimmage. Sean Payton, getting him a long athletic tight end that can make acrobatic catches and really separate better than anybody else in this class, how can you not mock him here?
And Sean Payton had that. Remember in New Orleans, we said the same things about Jimmy Graham. And look at what he did with Jimmy Graham in New Orleans.
Yep. So then I went with Will's guidance, Jalen Milroe to Pittsburgh. Not necessarily I think it's very similar actually to the Shedeur pick. The Steelers need another quarterback in that room. Right. Like, and you can't wait until round 3 if you're Pittsburgh, because they don't have a round 2.
The
Right.
only thing I'll say on this pick, if they do decide to do this, which is when you talk about a quarterback with Mike Tomlin's vision, with his mentality, with his toughness, Milroe does fit that. If he does decide to do this, he better trade down. Like, I do not want him picked at this spot at all. I don't want him forced when you can trade down, collect assets. And if you decide to take him at the beginning of the second round, yeah, so be it. You can't really make too much of an egregious argument there because of the potential he has. We can talk as much shit as we want on Jalen Milroe. His throwing has so much of a long ways to go. This is an elite athlete at the quarterback position. Don't get it twisted. Anthony Richardson, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Milroe. You can all group them in the same tier. I'm a Ravens fan. I'll have my own feelings about Lamar Jackson. But when you talk about elite athletes at the quarterback position, Jalen Milroe is right up there with both of them. He has such a long ways to go as a quarterback. I don't want him touching the field in his first 2 years, in my opinion. But if they do decide to do this, they better trade back.
Well, but I'll counter that. Right. So in this mock, Cleveland ended up taking Hunter, right?
Yes.
So Cleveland is still without a quarterback.
Yes.
And Milroe's college coach is at Cleveland, right?
Yep. The obvious fit there.
So I don't know that Pittsburgh could trade down too much further, because we're starting to hit trade territory here. Like, where would Cleveland go to trade up to get Milroe?
Yeah.
I don't know. So first of all, I have a philosophy. If you have to trade back to get your quarterback, you didn't really want him anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, but second, I don't know that Milroe falls too much further with the concept that Cleveland or the Giants could be looking to trade up to get him.
Yeah. It's a big wild card once you get out of Cam Ward being picked and then whoever QB2 is in the top 10. I do believe we see a second quarterback drafted in the top 15 picks. Which one? It's left to be determined. But once you get into the late first round, especially with teams like the Browns, the Giants at the beginning of the second round, just eyeing up a quarterback that's going to fall to them, it's going to be very tricky, especially for the Steelers situation.
The other wild card we're not talking about, the Rams. Like, how much longer is Matt Stafford's body going to hold up? When does he all of a sudden, the spit, duct tape, and Jack Daniels wear off, and it's like, oh crap, I think we broke him here. So, look, I have Jackson Dart going to the Rams. That just screams Sean McVay being, one step ahead of everybody. He gets the insurance, but I got the Steelers taking him. Look, he is Mike Tomlin's loved child. A guy who is a locker room leader, tough as nails, athletic, throws the deep ball. Yeah, he has issues, but you know what? He's yes, sir, no, sir. He takes hard coaching. The players love him. Tomlin's probably going, this is my guy. I'm in love. We're holding hands. I don't have to worry about Aaron Rodgers. This is my guy I can mold, and he loves hitting people. Damn it. He's a Steeler for life.
Yeah. So why don't we take a minute? We've gone through 21 picks. Let's pause for a quick commercial. Bill, would you like to introduce yourself to our Monday night audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find all of my work over on X at Spark Scouting. Also a writer and analyst for the Right Way Sports Network. That's TWSN.net. You can catch me Wednesday nights on the Mrs. Are Relevant podcast on the late show currently, but as we move into the 2026 cycle, we're going to kick it up to the early show at 7 p.m. So you can find me there. And then you can also find me here with some pretty decent frequency, NFL Draft Fanatic, No Iron Fanatic on the Mrs. Are Relevant podcast. But yeah, Spark Scouting on X and the Right Way Sports Network, TWSN.net is where you can find all my written content. I actually just dropped a piece tonight on the top 32 teams perfect prospects. So one perfect prospect for each team, and Colston Loveland was the Denver selection. So that's why I kind of went there. So
cool. Well, Josh, a long time ago, I said, hey, how would you like to come on a podcast and do 5 weeks of scouting reports? And here we are 6 months later, and you're still here. So, I think we're having fun, but you want to let everybody know who you are and how they can find you.
Yeah, Josh Townsend. You guys can follow me at Twitter at juice_T23. then the final revisions this week, you're going to get full player prospects rankings, every position from me this week, along as the Google sheet to my whole entire big board. Not going to be no fancy complete article. I don't have time right now to do a full article. I'm just giving you guys the whole work on the Google sheet, what we've been doing for the past 7-8 months. You'll get all the prospects, where I have them graded, how I have them graded. You'll get the full 7-round big board mock draft. And it's here. The draft starts on Thursday. Everybody's going to be really intrigued with round 1. I'm looking at 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round, seeing where all of these missing puzzle pieces go in the middle parts of this draft, because this is a middle rounds draft this year. This isn't a top draft.
And Chris, I believe this is your first time on a Draft
Yes,
Professor
thank you guys for
podcast.
having me so far. You can check me out at lastcallpodcast.com, also on X, Last Call W Chris C. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. We interview more people. So we interview a lot of writers like Josh Vogel. We've had Price Carter. We've had, of course, Parker Blake, who'll be having on this week before the draft to talk about the draft and what he's hearing. We also interview a lot of boxers, MMA fighters, and it's basically, I like to ask questions which casual people know, like, hey, what was Team X looking for? What is Team Y looking for? Why is this prospect falling? And what is it that offensive tackles, why is it that small arms matter or don't matter for some teams?
Okay. And you can follow the channel. Here we are. At NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. It is the same on X as it is on YouTube. The best thank you can give us is hit that subscribe on YouTube and hit that like on YouTube. Helps more people find the podcast, and we do like interacting with more people. So I
have a question for all three of you, because this is what people ask me. So what are you hearing from scouts and GMs this year? Like, which is like now every year it's like, oh, monkey see, monkey do. Oh, we got to get the athletic quarterback. Then, we got to get the big wide receiver. Like this year, what are you hearing from scouts and GMs after the Super Bowl? Like, oh, we need to get this in this draft because this is now the big, sexy, trendy it position.
I think what I hear is you're going to be able to draft starters. You're going to be able to draft starters well into round 5. So if you're a team and you have all of your original picks, so you can pick 5, a player in each round. I think what I hear the most is you're drafting starters and you're drafting them at non-fantasy football positions. Right. So you're going to get your starting offensive lineman, a starting defensive lineman, maybe a starting edge, a starting safety, a starting corner. And I can already tell you, my favorite drafts are going to be the teams that draft at least 3 trench players on day 1 and 2. Right?
So from what I've heard with scouts that I've talked to at the Senior Bowl, one, offensive line is going to be at a premium at this draft, especially at the tackle position. If from scouts that I've talked to, some guys are rated lower, some guys are rated higher, but it's not going to matter in this draft class because once you get into the 4th round, you're really picking and choosing. You can say the same thing about the quarterback class. But the one thing that I've been hearing so much, and this goes for the running back class too, there is going to be a lot of edge rushers picked in the top 64. Don't be surprised if there's 16 edge rushers picked in the top 64. We're not talking about the general first round guys, the guys that are going to trickle into the beginning of the 2nd round. Guys like David Walker, Jordan Burch, Josiah Stewart, Oladejo. Those are all guys that scouts are enamored with in this draft, and they're going to be at a premium, especially once you get into the 2nd round.
I definitely think that how do I want to say this? So I remember watching several Kyle Krabs mock drafts earlier in the draft cycle, and there were always a lot of edges that went in the teens. And I think that's just being delayed 15 picks. I think the edges are going to come off right after Cleveland picks and New England picks and the Giants pick. Right. So I think Tennessee at the top of round 2 will likely take an edge. And then I think there's going to be a whole bunch that come off the board right around the time that the 49ers and the Jets pick. Okay. So I had the Chargers taking Matthew Golden. So Bill, I know that you can see here, I did not have Luther Burden coming off the board here in round 1, but where do you have Golden right now, Bill?
So Golden is my wide receiver 2 on my board currently, and he would be my 12th overall player. I like wide receiver for the Chargers, but one name that I will throw out there that I am higher on, and I will continue to scream it into the void until draft day, is Alec Manor. And the reason I do that is because a size speed demon like that opposite Lad McConkey, a bigger wide receiver, what does Harbaugh love to do? He loves to run the ball. Who's the best run blocking wide receiver prospect in this class?
You
Yep.
Saying. So that's the soapbox I'll get on with Alec Manor until draft day.
So, Josh, do you have Golden high enough to take him in round 1?
I have him higher to take where he's at with the Chargers. Like we've said, Cowboys are an ideal spot for him anywhere. He's a top 20 prospect for me. I think this would be a good value for him. Where I've always leaned for the Chargers, and I'm going to lean till this doesn't happen on Thursday on draft day, is they're going to go with either Colson Loveland or Kenneth Grant that falls to them. I just think the Michigan ties are too much, and it's not like we're talking about reaches at this position. Those are both very good prospects that will be plug and play under the Harbaugh tree right away, especially for Kenneth Grant. I think that would be an ideal scenario for him.
Okay, and then Chris, I had Derek Harmon going to Green Bay. So in me listening to my Packers people, specifically Brian Maffei, this pick was either going to be Harmon, Azare Thomas, and Michael Williams was already off the board.
Mm-hmm.
So there were there's 3 or 4 people that hit the Packers thresholds. My opinion is the Harmon is the highest rated of those. What do you think Harmon to the Packers, Chris?
Makes sense. I think we need to find out what exactly is going to happen with Jair Alexander, because if he gets traded or if they plan to trade him, I could see it being either Trey Amos or Azalea Thomas, because they're going to look and go, wait a minute here. We're losing Alexander. We have no other cornerbacks we trust. Yeah, we need a cornerback. And I don't know. From what I've heard from scouts with Harmony is he's solid, but there's not enough upside. Walter Nolan's the guy that you go, if he finds the right coach, he could be a monster. Kenneth Grant is the guy that's just beefy. With Harmon, I have him going 31 to the Chiefs. I think he's a solid defensive lineman. He's a defensive tackle. I just think the Packers right now, Alexander wants out. They need a cornerback. I think they'll look and go, well, defense tackle's deep. We could probably get even Alfred Collins or Deion Walker in the second round will be good.
Okay. And Bill, where do you have Harmon on your board, and who did you have going to the Packers in your mock?
So Harmon on my board is 35th overall. But I would not be opposed to him going Green Bay at 23. It reminds me a lot of Christian Barmore, athletic pass rusher with some serious juice. In my mock, though, I had the Packers going with edge, and I am going with my number 2 edge, 5th overall prospect, Nick Scoularton from Texas A&M, who also kind of fits what they want to do. But I think Chris hit the nail on the head there too. You have to figure out what you're going to do at corner with Jair on his way out. So if it's not edge, it almost has to be corner, and you hate pigeonholing it. And I keep throwing this joke out there to Newt and Brian, and I don't think they like it anymore. But the first year that the NFL draft is held in Green Bay is the year that the Packers finally take a wide receiver in round 1. And
that should be
Ibuka would make sense there, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Okay. So, Josh, I had the Chiefs trading up to get Josh Simmons. And I think from listening to you, you have Simmons even higher than 24 on your board, right?
Correct. I mean, Simmons without injury has a legit argument with Armand Membu, in my opinion, being OT1 in this class. He is OT2 in my opinion. He's 14th on my big board, so I still think the upside's still there. And with how fast he has recovered through this pre-draft process, and with teams checking him on his medicals, him participating at the pro day, that's going to give a boost of his stock no matter what. His floor, in my opinion, is the Texans at 25. I don't see a world where they pass on him or Kelvin Banks, in my opinion, even though I'm lower on Kelvin Banks. If the Chiefs trade up to 24, get Josh Simmons, they executed the first round to perfection. I will be very mad as a Ravens fan because
The whole league would be mad at that point.
Everybody will be very mad at that, especially the Texans. Even though they'll get a consolation prize in Josh Connerly, who is a very good prospect in his own right, Josh Simmons just being one pick right there out of their reach is going to piss Nick Caserio off.
Yeah. So, Bill, I'm curious. In your mock, did you have the Vikings sticking and picking or trading out?
I had the Vikings sticking and picking, and I had them going with Malachi Starks from Georgia. I think if you're gonna have the Vikings trade out, that is a Cleveland trade up spot because the assistant GM and Minnesota's current GM was a former assistant GM in Cleveland, so there's already that connection that they've worked together before. So if you have them trade out, I think it's going to be with Cleveland coming up for Jalen Milroe or Jackson Dart or Shedeur Sanders. Heaven forbid that he falls to 24.
Yeah, so I had Minnesota just trading back of about 7 spots. So.
Yep.
And it does make sense for Minnesota to trade back. If Malachi Starks is off the board and they're going after a Nick Manowari type, who concerns me a little bit, not because of the player profile. I love Nick Manowari. He's a top 25 player for me, absolutely. It's just the Lewis scene, fucking flashbacks I get when they draft Nick Manowari. I can't get past that. Even though they're two completely different players and I have all the faith in Nick Manowari, I would be more than fine for a trade back in this scenario and take him at 31.
Yep.
Okay, and then Bill, what do you think of Josh Connerly to the Texans at 25?
So I like Josh Connerly to the Texans. I think he's one of the more athletic offensive tackles in this class. And he's also one of the youngest. If he's there at 33, Cleveland would hop all over it without a doubt. But I think he's one of the more athletic, younger tackle prospects in this class. Every time I look at him, I see Diet Rashawn Slater just all over him. And if the Texans were to get that at 25, it completes the revamp of their offensive line.
Yeah. So, Chris, what do you think of Connerly at 25?
That's what I have him going. I mean, he's a left tackle. He's big. He's played. As I've been told. He's a guy who has he's nastiness, good foot, quickness and pass and pro. And I mean, the last image we saw of the Texans was poor CJ Stroud getting basically assaulted by the Chiefs. I think George Karlaftis has a warrant out for him for basically assault and battery on Fisher and Stroud that game. So they need to do something. And I know Texans fans are going, wait a minute, why did we make that trade? Why did we get rid of our left tackle? But I think Connerly is the pick for the Texans because they got to fix that offensive line. It is just Swiss cheese.
So I consider Donovan Jackson there, Josh.
Yeah, that's completely fine too.
Yeah.
A little bit of a reach compared to consensus, but I love the production he showed over the past 2 years. His consistency, his technique, especially at left tackle. He has shown that he can actually be an adequate starter at left tackle at the NFL level. Will he be superstar, like Pro Bowl potential at left tackle? No, I think he's way better as a guard. But like Donovan Jackson realistically could go 17 to the Bengals. There's a world where that happens. So it's not out of the world of possibilities where Donovan Jackson goes to the Texans at 25.
Okay, so at 26 for the Rams, I was looking at corner. So my question to Bill, what does your corner board look like at 26? At this point, I think Hairston is the third corner off the board after Hunter, Johnson, Barron. Oh, wait, no, and then I had Morrison. So this would be Hairston at this point is corner 5. What is who is your corner 5, and are they high enough to take at pick 26?
So my corner 5 would still be available. It's Savon Revel from ECU, and I have him graded as the 36th overall prospect, so I could see him here. 2 names that I'll throw out for the Rams. Chris kind of hit on one earlier with quarterback. I could see Jackson Dart here as a Matthew Stafford replacement. But the other one that I could see that isn't getting talked about nearly enough that I'm going to throw out into the ethos, Carson Schlesinger from UCLA.
Yep.
Imagine putting a linebacker in the middle of that defense with that defensive line revamp they had last year. Yes, you still need help on the back end, but this corner class is deep enough where you can get a nickel guy and a couple of pieces on day 3. Schlesinger just feels like a Les Snead pick.
Yeah.
It just feels that way. It's just the vibes. But yeah, I would say Savone Revel, Jackson Dart, and Carson Schlesinger are the top three guys here for Les Snead.
And what do you think, Chris, for the Rams?
Oh, it's Jackson Dart. This, as I said, this screams, Snead, McVay. Okay, we're going year to year now on Stafford. He might just fall apart. The shoulder might go, the knees might go. Let's get the young kid in there. That way you can sit him for a year. We then get the young quarterback on a cheap deal. You get 5 years to figure out if he's the franchise guy or not. And he plays that kind of football that I think McVay and Snead love. Just go in there, throw the ball downfield, quick passes, and again, he's one of those guys that we saw. He played in the bowl game because he basically loved his teammates so much, and he didn't want to just let them down. I think that screams to a lot of coaches like this is a guy who is the leader that we want running the team.
Okay. And then Josh, like your Ravens, I have Trey Amos going that's like that's Bill's Mafia like dream pick. But what do you think of Amos to the Ravens? And I know I ignored some interior offensive line needs, but what do you think of that pick?
You'll not hear any pushback on Trey Amos getting picked to the Ravens, the Rams, Packers, any quarterback needy team. Trey Amos being slotted there would be an ideal plug-and-play day one starter, in my opinion. Throw two names out there for you just because this is what I've been hearing from people in the Ravens community. Nick Manowari, if he's still on the board, there's a safety need for the Ravens. He would be a dream fit, in my opinion. He will be able to develop properly. And I know the pre-draft process has been shitty, for a lack of terms, for Tyler Booker, but if there's one team that he fits perfectly in the first round, it is Baltimore. We got really good production out of our offensive guards this year, surprisingly, with Daniel Falalele moving in the right guard. That was the most surprising thing I've ever seen in my life. And we got Andrew Voorhees behind, but if we want just an immediate upgrade, Tyler Booker would be the pick there as well. I would be more pissed if we took Booker, but I would understand it. Trey Amos or Nick Manowari would be my two favorite picks, though.
And Bill, how about you? What are your thoughts for Baltimore there at 27?
So I like Amos there. I don't like Amos as a prospect per se. He's a little bit further down my cornerback board. But two names that I keep hearing pretty frequently, Josh already hit on one. It's Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama. It just makes too much sense when you have interior offensive line help. One name that's picked up some steam over the past week to 10 days or so, don't sleep on Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College to Baltimore. Do they need edge help? Not necessarily. They've got other more pressing needs. But you mean to tell me you're going to give Coach Harbaugh another speedy, quick, athletic edge rusher opposite Owe, and I have to deal with Ezeraku and Owe every single game? It just makes sense. But I think it's Booker, then Amos, then Ezeraku is 1, 2, 3.
And edge is absolutely a possibility here. Odafe Owe has been chopped around. He hasn't signed an extension at all. Kyle Van Noy's got maybe 2 years left in his career if you can get everything out of him. Adisa Isaac's still there, but he's a third-round pick that didn't produce much. David Ojabu, again, third-round pick that didn't produce much, but a high-potential guy. They could use an immediate starter. Donovan Ezeraku fits that. I also see Nick Scorton being my guy to be going there. If he's still on the board, that'd be pretty fun.
Okay, and then I had Scourton going the pick after to the Lions.
Yep.
So, and I know, like Bill, I know you said he's your 5th overall prospect, right?
Yep, that is correct. Number 5 on my big board right now.
So, okay, and then I had Ursery going to the Commanders. This pick puzzles me as to what the Commanders would do, because I could see this being Luther Burden if the board falls this way. I could see it being Ursery. I could see it being Io Manor, not necessarily Io Manor over Burden, though. I could see this being Omarion Hampton, right? Because I didn't have Hampton going in round 1 in this. But they could literally pick any position that's not quarterback.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't think they would do defensive tackle with they drafted Newton and I think they extended Payne.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But
edge is in play for them as well. I had them going Mike Green because I had him sliding a little bit. When you have Cleveland Farrell as a part of your edge rusher rotation, we have to have a conversation with Dan Quinn. I think edge is more of a need than people want to admit. I love Luther Burden, but I don't think he would fit in Washington just because they already have Debo Samuel, and him and Debo are very similar prospects in what you're going to ask them to do: get out in space, make plays athletically. So if they did go wide receiver, I wouldn't go Burden to the Commanders. I would go an Alec Iomanner type, on the boundary. But I think if you're looking at what the Commanders need, edge is the big one for me. I keep coming back to it. And then I don't see left tackle as a need with the Laramie Tunsil move.
Mhm.
But if you told me that Donovan Jackson was the selection for the Commanders where I could put him inside and kick him outside if Tunsil gets injured, I think that'd be a pretty smooth move as well.
And I'll throw one more name out there. I'm thinking more guys that fit the Dan Quinn type of mold of a player. We're talking about like Mike Tomlin, like his philosophy, getting players that fit his mindset. He's a little bit lower on my board. Hasn't really been talked about as a first-round prospect, a really high second-round prospect. But JT Tuimoloau would fit Dan Quinn's idea of being that prototypical run stuff in defensive end, hard-nosed guy that has some production and technique when it comes to rushing the passer as a defensive end.
I want to throw a wild card out there for the Commanders, and I blame this on Parker Blake. He's been talking it up all week, so I got to throw him out there. Gray Zabel. All of a sudden, we hear this guy during the Senior Bowl, and it's like, yeah, Gray Zabel he just won the whole the Senior Bowl. He was dominating guys, I guess coaches love him because he's this guy who plays with an edge, smart player, lower. He has the he's big enough to play tackle. The arm's a little bit short, but he's played guard. He's played center. He loves football. That's a Dan Quinn guy. Dan Quinn's probably looking at going, that's my guy. I can play him at center. I can play him at guard. He will just beat people up. I want that. God damn it. Get that guy on our team so we can protect Jaden Daniels.
So part of my thinking with Ursery, I don't have the team at 29 correct. Like, I think Ursery goes in round 1. And if he's there, I think somebody's going to be trading up ahead of New England, or that's New England picking Ursery, right? Because they need a tackle. So I wasn't projecting which team was going to trade up to get him, but I think this is about where Ursery goes. And somebody's trading up to get ahead of the Patriots. I don't think Ursery's not the right tackle for the Browns, right, Bill?
So he would fit. He certainly would fit, but he is a bit of an older prospect, and Browns are going to want to look younger, like a Josh Connerly. But ultimately, you have to also have the conversation. When you're looking at trading up, typically that's premier positions, edge rusher, quarterback's the number one. I don't project anyone trading up for Ursery. I think the way he's valued by the league, he could be had in round 2. But I could certainly see it. I just wouldn't, because you could get him 33, 35, 37. And I think that teams are going to look at it that way. But I did like Josh's JTT shout out for the Commanders, because my comp for JTT is Cliff Averill. Dan Quinn was the Seattle defensive coordinator when Cliff Averill had his really 2 great seasons in 2013 and 2014. So, but yeah, I could see Ursery falling. And from what I've heard, I could see him falling all the way to the 50s.
And I'll throw one more thing out there before we get past the Commanders pick. I do not know what to think about this. This is a 4th-round guy, in my opinion, but has all the potential in the world. Has taken multiple top 30 visits with the Commanders and Ravens as a local guy for there. Charles Grant is in that Gray Zabel conversation. He is not as polished, and I don't think there is a world he goes in the 1st round. But if you're talking about Dan Quinn mold, John Harbaugh mold, somebody that we saw Cole Strange get drafted in the 1st round. Crazier shit has happened before.
Cole Strange, Shaq Thompson.
Yes.
It's happened.
That's what I'm talking about. Charles Grant is very intriguing to me, a guy that I'm lower on, but I love all the potential in the world, and it's a guy that I think is going to get his name called really earlier than a lot of people expect.
Okay. And then at 30, I had Buffalo taking Kenneth Grant. Ironically, I didn't want to put Buffalo here. I do think this is where Kenneth Grant goes. I think this is like a San Francisco trading up because San Francisco in this took an edge earlier. So from that standpoint, San Francisco is sitting there without a defensive line room. And this to me is like, as a Bills fan last year, I wanted Xavier Legette. That was the guy I wanted Buffalo to get. And he's sitting there on the board, and Buffalo trades out of the pick. They're going to do the same thing to me with Kenneth Grant this year. Kenneth Grant's going to be on the board, and Buffalo's going to trade out of the pick. Because, like, for Buffalo, I could see them, you trade down a little bit, and you get Ravel and Tyleik Williams, or you get Ravel and Alfred Collins. It's better to me to get two of those guys than one, and I'll skip drafting Kenneth Grant to just, let's say, tear down like a half a notch and get like a Revel, or let's say like between like Revel, Landon Jackson, Alfred Collins, Tyleik Williams, get two of those guys early in round 2. And then I have the Vikings trading for Emamori, or drafting Emamori after the trade back, and then the Eagles going with Izaraku. So, Bill, other than Luther Burden and Omarion Hampton, who I know you're very high on both, any players that are not in this mock that surprised you?
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head. Luther Burden, obviously, Omarion Hampton, obviously some guys that I'm higher on, Alec Manor, Alfred Collins. But I think other than that, the only other one that I would note would probably be Savone Revel and Mason Taylor. Savone Revel, with the amount of teams that need quarterback in this back end that we've talked about from about pick 21 on, the amount of cornerback help, I don't see a way where Savone Revel, if his medicals have checked out, which by all accounts they have, him not going here. And then Mason Taylor, I've firmly been in the camp for about a month now that we're going to see 3 tight ends in round 1. We're going to see Warren, we're going to see Lovin, we're going to see Mason Taylor in round 1, by all accounts, probably to pick 32 to Philadelphia. They take Mason Taylor and then trade Dallas Goedert, like Chris says, and then Howie Roseman looks like a freaking wizard, and we all wonder how he does it. So those would probably be the big ones, Savone Revel and Mason Taylor for me.
So, Josh, how about you? Who is high on your board that didn't get picked in this mock?
I only have one egregious one and one guy that I think he's too sure of a prospect to fall out of the first round, just because he's not the most explosive guy in the world, that doesn't have the amazing athletic profile behind him. I think Emeka Buka has been too productive to fall out of the first round. I think somebody's going to look at him and go, yep, that's a plug-and-play starter for multiple contracts. I don't want to pass up on that, even though there is very good wide receiver depth in this class. Do not get me wrong. And again, there's been a lot of character concerns with this guy. If there wasn't, this be a surefire top 15 pick. He wouldn't fall past Atlanta. James Pierce. I mean, I understand the concerns with his frame being just a wide 9 alignment, not being that powerful with his power profile. I just think it's prospect fatigue, in my opinion. I love his tape. I love his agility. I love his get off. I think he's just there's too much potential with James Pierce to just keep overlooking him for some of these other guys.
Okay. And Chris, how about you? Who's high on your board that I didn't include?
I mean, you mentioned everybody. Everybody's already mentioned the guys I thought. I mean, I'll say it again. I keep hearing the smoke of, oh, hey, Jackson Dart's getting drafted in the first round. And at first I thought, okay, this is BS. Somebody's pulling my leg. They say it's gimmicky offense. And then, you hear, hey, he's been mocked at 15, top 15 by the Saints. Hey, he's being, hot and teams are hot and heavy. And this is a quarterback league. There's teams that, are desperate for a quarterback. And you look and you go, let's see. Rams, Browns, maybe Giants, maybe Raiders, because they have older quarterbacks, but they want the future. And he's that guy you look and go, well, you know what? We're not going to be terrible next year. So if we're not getting a top 10 pick, and we might be able to get our quarterback now, and we just sit him. As I said, I could see the Rams are my favorite, but I would not count out the Raiders because it's something Tom Brady said. I love it when quarterbacks can sit for a year. And I could see him trading up to 31, 30, try to get either the Chiefs or the Bills to bite. Next thing you know, he has his future quarterback. He doesn't have to rush him. He can sit him. And that's just a great story. That is also as you said, it's the business side of, hey, we get to sell the sexy pick. It's Tom Brady with the heir apparent Jackson Dart. This is Brady 2.0. They're going to market the crap out of that in Vegas.
So I guess my quarterback take is that the three teams that were taking quarterbacks in this mock needed a starter now, right? The teams that would have a quarterback sit, so like the Raiders, like you mentioned, if you're going to draft a quarterback and let him sit, don't use a premium asset on the QB because you want to keep your draft capital for next year, right? So like to trade back up into round one, are you all like if the Raiders do it, can they only give up draft capital this year? And does that deplete their draft capital this year? Because you don't want to give up your first round pick next year. If you need a quarterback, and many people have heard me say this, but basically what you need to do is you need to trade and get a first round pick next year, trade a player, get a second round pick, trade a player, get a third round pick. So if any team like the Steelers could trade out of round one and pick up a round one next year, then take Pickens? Take Pickens, offload him for a second. Take Freiermuth or some other player on your roster and offload him for a third. And if you add up the worst two first-round picks, the worst two second-round picks, and the worst two third-round picks, and you package all six of those picks together, it gets you to the third overall pick. So you would have more than enough ammunition to trade yourself into the top five and get a quarterback next year. More than enough. Because we know that Pittsburgh isn't finishing as one of the two best teams, right? So their draft capital would be even better than the two worst picks in the round. So I'm very biased because, Brandon, that was how Brandon Beane got Josh Allen. Like Buffalo made the playoffs and we drafted Josh Allen at 7 overall the next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And I can see where Chris is coming from too, because you look at the teams that need quarterbacks. Cleveland has Flacco and Pickett. By all accounts, they're willing to roll with that. Giants have Jameis and Russell, but should both of those organizations roll with that at quarterback in good conscience? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So I could see both teams taking Shedeur Sanders. I could see Jalen Milroe in New York. I think he'd be a better fit for what Josh Allen wants to do than Shedeur Sanders. Would Jalen Milroe go with number 3 overall? I think if that happens, the entire internet would burn down. But would it shock me to see it happen? Absolutely not. The NFL draft is not an exact science. It is a fun exercise every year. And we always look to see who's making the most shocking picks. I'm going to throw this out there. It's a bit of a hot take, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. I would not be shocked if we see 4 quarterbacks go in round 1 on Thursday night.
I guarantee it, because to get back to Jim and Bill, here's the wild card team, Minnesota Vikings. In terms of they're looking right now, they don't have a second round pick because they traded that to the Texans. They have a compensatory pick at 97 because they traded their 88th pick to the Jaguars. As I said, if you're Cleveland going, hey, you know what, you trade down, we'll give you a second and a third. I could see the Vikings go, you know what, we get an extra pick, another crack at the apple. This is going to be a deep draft, so as you said, we can get an extra player here. Yeah, we're not going to get the first, but as I said, it's Dart is the guy that everybody talks about as he's just, you get the right coach, whether it's McVay, whether it's Pete Carroll, they'll unlock the magic, and all of a sudden it's the Ravens when they drafted Lamar Jackson, when they had Joe Flacco, and now they look like geniuses.
Yep.
100%.
Well, we are hitting our almost our 2-hour mark. So for Bill, for Josh, for Chris, for the 70 podcasters at the Draft Professor, for myself, thank you for watching. The draft is 2 days away. See you, everybody.
Peace.